Welcome to FOXSOUL's Black Report. This is a place where we bring you Black America's headlines, news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi.
And I'm Melissa. On today's report, 5 million Americans have missed the second dose of the vaccine. IRS holds millions of tax returns. Biden gets high marks, and the Southern Plains brace for severe storms.
Inglewood, California Mayor James Butts joins us to talk policing and politics. Plus, we'll show you why Minnesota AG Keith Ellison had to once again defend George Floyd, and U.S. Congresswoman Cori Bush holds strong for an end to qualified immunity.
Political strategist Dallas Fowler is here to discuss California's governor recall. And we talk Oscars, Simone Biles, Funky Pickles, and supermoons.
All right, we have all that and so much more. So if you're ready, it's our voice and our truth. Let's get it.
To me, this reeks of conflict of interest.
Do we know if he actually waved a gun? We only hear one side of the story.
This just really did make me feel good that the justice system did what they needed to.
So we're going to keep following this story, and we will have the latest for you. Elizabeth City, North Carolina, officials have declared a state of emergency over concerns of how protesters will react to the release of the Bodycam video in the sheriff's deputy's shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. Deputies shot and killed Brown outside of his house while executing a search warrant. Court documents show authorities secured that search warrant after investigators say they recorded Brown selling small amounts of cocaine and meth to an informant. Attorney Chantel Cherry Lassiter watched a 20-second portion of body camera video with Brown's family today, and she says Brown did not appear to be a threat to officers as he backed his vehicle out and tried to drive away. The family's lawyers also criticized local authorities for only showing 20 seconds of the video from a single body camera.
We do not feel that we got transparency. We only saw a snippet of the video. When we know that the video started before and after what they showed the family. And they determined what was pertinent. Why couldn't the family see all the video?
All right, now take a look at what former South Carolina politician and attorney Bakari Sellers has to say.
I want to highlight the disrespect to this family. I want to highlight the broken system of justice we have in this country. As we're going through this process, we told the family that they would have their attorneys in there as some comfort. We went back and forth, and I just want you to say I've never been talked to like I was talked to in there. Wow.
It's important to note, I just want to add this with context when it comes to the fact that officials are calling a state of emergency. Protests have largely been peaceful. I also want to note, according to CNN, 7 deputies have been placed on administrative leave, 2 others quit, 1 retired, and this, I thought, was an interesting point. I absolutely wanted to get your thoughts. Ben Crump says that they were told authorities needed time to blur some of the faces in the video, and that was largely the biggest issue on why they weren't getting the body cam video, why the public wasn't getting the body cam video. And he was really frustrated by that because he said the shooters are being protected and their reputations are being protected when Brown is not. Brown's rap sheet, his history, what he is accused of doing, not convicted of doing in this instance, has been, splayed everywhere. But the person who is now being accused of shooting and killing him is allowed to have their face blurred, and he was frustrated by that.
It's disgusting when you see this, and it happens over and over again. You think about it. Imagine this family. I believe this happened last Wednesday, right? So you have to wait through a whole weekend before you can see what really happened. Then, first of all, they disrespect you on how many people you can bring in there. They try to shut it down to just 2 people. And then once you're in there, they give you 20 seconds. They don't give you the full story, yet they try to sow shade on his name and protect the officers. Like, where we at?
It's really awful. And on top of that, they were told that they were going to get the body cam footage around 11:30 a.m. Their time, not, of course, in PST. But there were updates literally every 30 minutes saying we were going to get it now at 1:30. Okay, now it's 1:45. Still haven't gotten it. And then, to Brooke's point as well, to blur out So, Attorney Ben Crump, he said for them to delay this, it is unacceptable. He said, don't prolong it because it only builds mistrust. And that was very strong for me because, we talk about this a lot on our show. There should be a rule across the board, like I said last week, that when something like this happens, the body camera footage needs to come out within this amount of days. Because like Ben Crump says, it builds mistrust. And now it's kind of like, you need to blur out stuff, or do you need to blur out what was really going on? You know what I mean? It gives them a chance to make their own narrative, and it's just not right.
Yeah, two things is like it's just so part and parcel with whenever something like this happens, muddying the person's name, the victim's name. They did the same thing to George Floyd. They've done the same thing to everybody. Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner. You name it. They've always found a way to villainize the victim, especially if they are a victim of color. So that's one part that is just continuing to be a source of frustration for all of us. And the second thing is, I just wonder, like, at what point, maybe there needs to be like an independent council or committee that's brought in to review body cam footage once a situation like this has happened. An independent council that is not related to law enforcement, that views and judges the footage and allows the family to see it as it went on. Because if we leave it up to law enforcement to police themselves, we're continuously going to be in this position. You're right. It's frustrating. So
I like that, Melissa. Actually.
Yeah, we're gonna keep you guys updated as the story unfolds. More than 5 million Americans have missed getting their second COVID-19 vaccine dose, indicating a growing trend that could endanger the U.S. efforts to return to normalcy. The New York Times reports that the rate of people missing their second dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine has more than doubled since the beginning of the national vaccine rollout. 5 million people accounts for about 8% of those who have received a first dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. The CDC reported Sunday that 95 million people, about 28.5% of the population, have been fully vaccinated, and about 140 million people, about 42.2% of the population, have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Several people interviewed by the Times said that they were afraid of the vaccine side effects, while others told the newspaper that they felt protected by one dose. So speaking of the Times article, Dr. Stanley Perlman, who's a professor at the University of Iowa, who's also a member of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, he basically said that, side effects are a temporary discomfort, but they're pretty standard with every single vaccine that you receive. It just basically shows that the body is responding and mounting an immune response. The reality of the situation is that we want to return to a sense of normalcy. All of us do. We are crying out for it. Yeah. So the reality is that we kind of, if you went and got the first dose, just kind of go and get the second. Demi, you've got your first dose, right?
I did get my first dose. Yeah. My second dose is actually next week, but I don't want anyone to think. Okay, so I read this report, right, that I want to read. It's from penmedicine.org. I want to make sure it is cited, okay, that this is not my thoughts. So this study came out, and I feel like the reason, Melissa, why this is happening is because you have a lot of people that say, okay, you'll have a worse side effect when you get your first dose. Some people say you'll have a worse side effect when you get your second dose. So penmedicine.org said that they suggest that people who if you had COVID and you recovered from it, after you get your first Moderna or Pfizer shot, you've built up the same amount of antibodies in your system as someone who never had COVID and got 2 shots. So you have studies like that come out that make a person say,
they confuse.
Hey, it's very confusing. It's kind of like, well, I don't want to get my second one. I might get this, but then also it's kind of like, oh, well, I got my first one. I should be okay. So it's a lot of misinformation that goes out. Like Melissa said, if you got your first shot, go ahead and get your second one. Like, you don't lose anything.
And I feel like, just the fact that the negative always weighs heavier. It's always the loudest. And people are tweeting and talking about having side effects, but the large number of people who have none aren't talking about that, because it would be weird to get on Twitter and say, second shot, nothing happened to me. And so people aren't seeing the fact that you also could have no side effects. And people aren't talking a lot about the fact that they wake up the day after the side effects feeling completely fine, completely normal. Some people say they got a better night's rest. And I mean, do you want to be safe from death or not? That's still what we're dealing with right now.
And real quick, my mom always told me, don't half-ass do anything. So if you're going to start it, finish it. Go ahead and get both shots. It's the right thing to do. Don't get caught up in what you're reading in the hype. CDC is saying it's what you should do. Just do it. All right. Well, the IRS is holding 29 million tax returns for manual processing, delaying tax refunds for many Americans, according to the National Taxpayer Advocate, an independent arm of the tax agency that looks out for consumers' interests. The delays are prompting some taxpayers to fret over social media about spending weeks waiting in limbo for their money, according to CBS News. Typically, the IRS sends most refunds within 3 weeks of taxpayers filing a return. But this year is complicated by several issues, including a backlog of 2019 paper tax returns that the IRS was unable to process after shuttering its office during the coronavirus pandemic. A recent notice from the IRS said that some people may experience a longer than average wait for their payments that may especially impact tax returns that need a correction due to changes made by the Recovery Rebate Credit, a tax credit adjustment for people who were owed more money on the stimulus check, or to verify income for the earned income tax credit and additional child tax credit, according to the agency. So look, just last week there were news and people were talking about, hey, you know what? Stimmy checks going to be coming out again because those that have go ahead and file their taxes, you're probably going to get that $1,400 you haven't gotten in weeks. Now we have this. At the end of the day, they're behind. Let's just sum it all up.
Yeah.
They are very much behind. Sometimes it's outdated IT systems. It could be limited resources, but they will get to you. But it's so unfortunate for those that need the money.
Thank you.
Now.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Romeo. I had that right here in my notes. I'm not copying. I'm not copying up your test.
We're on the same page.
That's exactly what I was thinking. The same thing. It's a pandemic. Romeo, IT things, like fix it. Figure it out. There are people that are depending on this money. There are people that didn't get laid off in 2020 or in 2020, excuse me, and they worked and they're like, okay, great, I'm going to get my $5,000 for my taxes, whatever, to feed their family. They're looking for, they filed early in January to make sure that they can have their money. And it's like, government administration, let's just figure it out so that people can get their money who are in need right now.
Yeah.
All right, so nearly 2/3 of Americans say in a new survey that they approve of the job that President Biden is doing in terms of handling the coronavirus pandemic. Now, this is a strong showing of support for the new president as he prepares to address a joint session of Congress this week. A Washington Post and ABC News poll was released on Sunday that says that 64% of Americans say they at least somewhat approve of the job Biden has done so far in terms of managing the pandemic and vaccine rollout in the U.S. Now, just 31% say they disapprove of his efforts, while the remainder had no opinion at all. The poll included responses from 1,007 U.S. adults between April 18th and the 21st. Political strategist Dallas Fowler is going to be here to join us later in the show to talk about the California governor recall and the presidential administration. I myself, I don't know if are we considered the younger? I don't know what age, they didn't give us an age bracket, but I'm going to consider myself the younger demographic that they're talking about.
I'm going to take that. I'm going to receive that.
I'm going to accept that. And the reason why I feel like he saved our grandparents. Biden came in, got to business. The day of the inauguration, I remember we were all talking about, I was like, hey, Biden could take a break. And you guys were like, no, he needs to keep his foot on the gas. He came in, he's been saving our parents, our grandparents that made it through the pandemic. So I could totally see why, people in, I don't want to say my age bracket, but, the younger, whatever. I don't want to, offend anybody, but, whatever age bracket they're talking about, right. You saved our family members. So I can understand why we would love Joe Biden and, not love Trump.
But there are a couple of things. There are some people say that Trump left the bar so low. Just him coming in and getting this makes him look like a winner already, right? Now, the average for the first 100 days since Truman is around 66%. So his is like 52%. COVID, 64% approve how he's handled that. 52% has approved how he handled the economy. And immigration is obviously low. He has a lot of things he has to work on that, like ASAP. But at the end of the day, I mean, the vaccinations are out, right? The economy is getting a little boost. The stimulus checks going out. That's a win-win-win. But he still has a lot of work to do.
Yes.
A lot of promises he's made.
And you know what I think is interesting is that it is easy to say that the bar is low, right? But the bar was low when Donald Trump was in office when it comes to the pandemic. Because you'll remember the pandemic and getting it right was a total and complete layup. All he had to do was say, hey, these are the rules. Yeah. Do this. I'm going to save your lives.
Right.
But he didn't want Obama getting credit for that.
But he didn't. He was talking about injecting bleach and Lysol and not wearing masks, and masks are fake manly, and all of these. Like, he likely would be our president today had he accepted that layup. And so they had the same bar.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Brooke. All I'm going to say is that we had a president that came in and he basically established the most diverse cabinet in presidential history. And it is a cabinet full of competent people. He has restored our faith in science. I give him high check marks just for that alone.
Yeah,
then
I heard
COVID
that.
response, and then immigration, then stimulus, all of that stuff. I give him really high remarks marks for what he's done thus far in this first 100 days.
Well, I know our soulmates will definitely let us know. But right now, let's check in with Fox Atlanta for a story on a comedian and an alleged racial profiling at the Atlanta airport.
A comedian who says he was racially profiled at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport continues to speak out tonight. Eric Andre tweeted today that he believes Clayton County police are using the war on drugs as an excuse to harass people of color. The actor says he was detained yesterday while boarding his flight.
But as Fox 5's Brian Hill explains, the department stands behind the officer's actions.
Clayton County police say Andre was never detained or put in handcuffs. They tell us there was a pleasant conversation between them. However, Andre says he wants the officers involved held accountable.
I'm not Walter White from Breaking Bad.
In an interview with TMZ, the 38-year-old actor says two plainclothes police officers asked him if he was transporting methamphetamines. The stand-up comic says he was the only person detained for a random search as he was attempting to board his flight.
I'm filming in Charleston and I'm connecting in Atlanta to go home. And they were like, can we search your bag? And I was like, no. Okay, so you can't. That's against the Constitution.
Immediately after Wednesday's encounter, Andre took to Twitter to address the issue. In a series of tweets, he said he was racially profiled, harassed, his rights were violated, and that he was the only person of color in line at the time.
Did an apology do it for you?
Yeah, or like reprimand the police that are clearly racially profiled.
In a Thursday afternoon news conference, Clayton County Police said Andre was not racially profiled and agreed to talk with police. They tell us this type of interaction happens often as part of their officers' duties.
Mr. Andre did give our officers consent to search his belongings, but instead, the officers chose not to do so.
Police said the encounter only lasted about 2 to 3 minutes.
Mr. Andre was cordial, personable, and pleasant to speak with. According to our records, this was the first and only interaction.
But the actor claims that statement is full of misinformation and he wouldn't allow officers to search his bags.
I said no because I know my rights.
On Thursday, he continued to tweet about the issue, saying he hopes the police department stops their racial profiling tactics at the airport and creating more lies about what happened. Multiple law enforcement agencies work at Hartsfield-Jackson. Airport officials say they plan to review policy procedures in the coming days. Both police and airport officials tell us there's no footage of the encounter. Brian Hill, Fox 5 News.
Wow.
I saw that on Twitter. I saw the whole thing kind of unfolding. Yeah, I didn't really. I just wanted to see how the story was going to unfold, but I know how that feels. You know what I mean? To feel like you're being singled out. He did specify that he was the only person of color that was stopped. So that would lead him to believe that it was a racial profiling incident.